Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this September meeting of the Angus Licensing Board. Mrs. Anderson, are there any apologies for absence, please?
Yes, Convener, there's apologies from Councillor King.
Okay, thank you very much. Any declarations of interest?
Convener, on item 8 LB 42.21, I know the applicant and I know people that work for the applicant, so I will come out of the meeting when that item's on.
Right, okay.
Thanks.
It'll be before that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. No, thank you. Okay, members, agenda item number, the minutes of the previous meetings. We're asked to submit for approval in front of us as correct record minutes of the meeting of this board held on the 5th and 12th of August 2021. Do we agree these as correct records?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. And the first item of business is 4A. 4A and B, actually, I think I know they're two separate applications, but it's the same agents, the same representation that's here for them. So if we can hear from Ms. Summers, please, do you want to speak to your application? And then there'll be, thank you.
Good morning, it's actually Kevin Clancy of Shepherd and Wedderburn who's going to be presenting. I believe he's in attendance.
Apologies.
No problem at all.
Mr. Clancy.
Good morning, Convener. Good morning, members of the board. Convener, you're quite correct. There are two applications before the board, one in relation to a petrol filling station at Arbroath and one in Montrose, but by the same applicant. So to all intents and purposes, although separate applications, they're very similar in terms of content. So what I propose might be most expedient is if I deal with one of the applications in a bit more detail, and it may well be that the submissions in respect of one, the board will be prepared to accept as submissions in respect of the other one. And it might just help move things along a bit quicker this morning, Convener.
That's fine, absolutely, Mr. Clancy, that's fine, no problem with that.
So I'm joined also by Trish Boschuk, who's the Central Operations Manager, and by Stuart Neal, who's the Area Manager. The application, if we deal with one for Arbroath, is in respect of a combined petrol filling convenience store, and it's appropriate to observe at the outset that the proposed premises are what the 2005 Act would refer to as excluded premises. Section 123 of the Act is engaged by this application. Members of the board should have before them the usual application papers, the applicant's statement as to how it complies with the licensing objectives, and the market research report prepared on behalf of the applicant. So the location is Carney Road, Arbroath, and the applicant commenced operations at this petrol station in September 2020, in what is branded a Shell petrol station. What's proposed by the application is a local convenience store with the usual mixed range of product lines and a small and ancillary off-sales facility. The premises currently sell hot food, chilled sandwiches, groceries, washing products, that sort of stuff, and there's also a cost machine. So in relation to the capacity for the petrol station at Arbroath, that would be 14 square metres, and the alcohol sales floor area would make up 17% of the shop sales floor area, and in my submission that would be might expect to see in equivalent premises. Board members will likely be interested to know what sort of range of products are envisaged. There will be a range of wines, beers and ciders sold in the premises, but if it gives board members any comfort, whilst spirits will be sold, they will only be sold from the inaccessible area, and there is no intention to sell what might be described as hyper beers and ciders. To give a comparison, the range would be similar to what you might expect to see in a co-op store. So I propose to deal with this as briefly as I can. Headings, representations, objections firstly, over provision secondly, and the crux of the application, that it's an excluded premises. And objections, pleasantly, there are none. Board members will have noted the applicants, and in my submission there's nothing before the board to demonstrate inconsistency with the licensing objectives. Secondly, the applicant premises does not sit within any area identified by the board as being over provided for, And in any event, it would appear from that there would only be 2 other off sales within a 1 kilometre locality, which is a key store on Carney Street and an RS McCall on Arbylot Road. So in my submission, notwithstanding there is no over-provision locality, that would not amount to over-provision of itself. In terms of the premises being excluded premises, this is really the crux of the application, and a report has been prepared on behalf of the applicant and previously emailed to the board's clerk. And I would adopt that report in full as part of my submissions, which will help move things along a bit more quickly this morning. And I would propose taking board members only through the most relevant sections. So board members will hopefully have seen the report. It's broken down into 6 sections. Section 1 is a summary of the application, and crucially, paragraphs 4, 5 and 6 within section 1 set out the legislative test, supplemented by judicial guidance that requires to be met by the applicant. And the Court of Session has interpreted section 123.5 of the Act as envisaging that there's a recognisable number of persons in the locality who, as a matter of their purchasing habits, see and treat the premises as the principal source from which they might, in the ordinary course, obtain either groceries or fuel, and who would properly consider themselves materially disadvantaged or inconvenienced where the retail facility is not provided from the premises. Section 2 provides, by way of background information, a summary of the applicant and the applicant's approach to licensing. The applicant successfully runs 74 sites in the UK. 71 of those are licensed, including premises in Auchinleck, East Kilbride, Stirling and Ardlingston. The remaining 3 of the 74 are unlicensed sites in Scotland. Both of these applications that call before the board today, and 1 recent acquisition for which it is hopefully intended a premises licence application may be made in due course. So these premises have already been a great success for the applicant, and it's anticipated that further acquisitions in Scotland are in the pipeline. This is an experienced applicant with experienced senior managers. In my submission, the applicant's excellent compliance record speaks for itself. And as you'll see at paragraph 8 of section 2, the applicant has a very strict approach to training, refresher training and regulatory compliance, with refresher training being undertaken for staff every 3 months. In terms of the licensing objectives more broadly, protecting and improving public health, drink-aware signage is prominently displayed in the premises. But if board members felt that additional signage would be recommended, then the representatives who are here today can take those points on board. I've already mentioned that in terms of the products on sale, the premium spirits will only be for sale in the inaccessible area. So they'll only be for sale behind the sales counter. And as board members will see from the layout plan, the VWS area is in a corner at a distance from the main entrance, but which can be easily supervised from the pay point. Protecting children from harm is a paramount consideration for this applicant, and the applicant puts in place suitable and sufficient measures. There's a strict Challenge 25 policy, which requires the provision of relevant identification. The relevant statutory notices are in place on the premises, and as I've mentioned, staff are trained every 3 months. Till prompts are in place, which prompts the cashier if the person looks over 25, and would provide the cashier with the minimum date of birth required for that purchase. So that's designed to be an extra fail-safe, ensuring that children and young persons do not purchase alcohol on the premises. There's a refusals log, as one might expect. That records not just that a purchase was refused, but whether that was because there was no ID, the customer appeared drunk, for example, or the cashier perhaps had suspicions of proxy selling. And the refusals log is monitored by Trish, who's attending this meeting, and her team on a fortnightly basis. So the applicant is very proud of its excellent track record in its other premises in this regard. Preventing public nuisance, this is not the sort of licensed premise that attracts nuisance in the usual sense. However, the applicant has on site plenty of litter bins and is prepared to display signage as regards nighttime noise and respecting its neighbours if that was considered appropriate. In relation to securing public safety, CCTV is installed. In relation to Arbroath, there are 4 internal cameras and 5 external cameras, so 9 CCTV cameras in total. The staff on the premises are suitably trained to carry out their duties. There's an accidents and incidents log, which would record any slip, trip or fall. And again, that's inspected by Trish and her team at minimum fortnightly, although any significant incidents are escalated immediately, as one would expect. with regular checks also taking place on the station forecourt throughout the day. And then finally, in relation to preventing crime and disorder, I've already touched on the steps taken in relation to preventing underage drinking and drunkenness and that sort of thing. I've already touched upon the regular training and refresher training that staff are put through, and there's the refusals book. The CCTV is by way of digital recording, and that would be stored for a minimum of 31 days and so available should the need present itself. And as I've mentioned, the high-priced premium products are kept behind the counter. There's an intruder alarm and panic buttons for staff, again, if the need arose. So in relation to each and all of these measures in my submission, the applicant takes compliance with the licensing objectives very seriously. Returning to the report, at section 3, this is the methodology which sets out the substance of the market research. Board members will note that 200 telephone interviews took place over the relevant dates, and the purpose was to obtain a representative sample of the shopping habits of people resident within the locality. And by selecting persons for telephone interview by postcode, the research was able to identify with a high level of accuracy where those individuals resided relative to the premises. Although it was necessary to extend the research to 1.5 kilometres to achieve 200 interviews, the application is presented on the basis that the relevant locality is 1 kilometre from the premises, and that's consistent with judicial guidance in other matters. Similar localities were also used in relation to the applicant's other applications in other board areas for the off-sales for the premises I've already referenced earlier in this submission. The application is presented on the basis that persons resident in the locality are reliant on the premises as the principal or main source of fuel. And section 4 sets out the analysis of that data. At question 1, board members will see that 105 respondents of the 200 purchased fuel from the premises. At question 2, of those respondents, 46 considered the premises to be their principal or main source of fuel. At question 3, of those respondents, 30 stated they were reliant on the premises as being their principal or main source of fuel. And question 4 addresses the point about material disadvantage if a person had to go elsewhere to purchase fuel. In my submission, the report therefore addresses the key components of principal source of fuel, reliance and material disadvantage, which the Court of Session in its judicial guidance has placed emphasis on. The key point for the board to take in my submission is that what you see is a significant number of persons resident in the locality beyond a de minimis level in the language of the Court of Session, who see and treat the premises as the principal source of fuel and who say they would be materially inconvenienced or disadvantaged if those facilities were not provided. The statutory test is reliance on either fuel or groceries. It doesn't require reliance on both, and this application is presented on the basis of reliance on fuel. Section 5 of the report outlines the conclusions. And as I've already mentioned, 38 persons resident considered to be a principal source of fuel, 24 persons within 1 kilometre considered themselves to be reliant, 33 persons resident within 1 kilometre considered themselves to be materially inconvenienced or disadvantaged. So I would invite the board to draw the conclusion that the market research discloses sufficient information to support the assertion that there's a recognisable number of persons in the locality who, as a matter of their purchasing habits, see and treat the premises as the principal source from which they might, in the ordinary course, obtain fuel, and who would properly consider themselves materially disadvantaged or inconvenienced where the petrol facility is not provided from the premises. Taking all of this into account, the board is invited to conclude that the requirements of the legislative test have been met for this application. Section 6 provides some additional detail around demographics. And so taking all of this into consideration in my submission, the application does not undermine the licensing objectives. The locality is not one that's over-provided for, nor will the application result in over-provision. The statutory test, when interpreted in line with the judicial guidance, is more than sufficiently met by the market research undertaken by the applicant. And there's no objections at all and no representations. Myself and the representatives are willing to take any questions board members have, but failing which I'd move the application be granted in relation to Arbroath, and then we can probably have a discussion in relation to Montrose.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clancy. Questions? Councillor Dunno, question?
Thanks, Mr. Clancy, for your presentation. It's very good. that this site is so small, and I wanted to know if this is successful. I mean, does the client have any plans to make it an actual, you know, mini market convenience store? Because the size of it at the moment, you know, you're not going to get an awful lot of alcohol actually in that place, and you'll be full. You only get 3 people in the place, and it's busy, you know. So it's it is a good idea to have it in that site, because there's a lot of new houses and things and for convenience. But I just wondered if maybe they'll be coming back later on with a bigger plan after this is. Maybe you don't know, but it was just a question. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor. I don't know the specific answer to part of your question. In relation to the first half, coming to the board, and Councillor used the words, it's a small amount of alcohol. In my submission, the applicant has properly come to the board seeking a reasonable BWS area that suits its purpose as a whole. So it wants to continue its ability to sell the other convenience items that it already does, but have this small but ancillary alcohol area. And in my submission, it's perfectly proper to have taken that cautious approach. In relation to a broader plan, it might be better, I think, if either Trish or Stuart could perhaps come off mute and provide a short summary, simply to directly answer the question for the longer term plan. And I think Trish or Stuart, the question really being asked is area as applied for, or are you going to make significant changes in the years to come?
Yes, good, thank you. We have no plans at the moment to extend it at all, but I can't answer for years to come. At the moment, it's going to stay as it is.
Okay, Councillor Durno, thank you. Councillor Moore, a question?
Yes, thank you, Convener. Mr. Clancy, I'll take Montrose first because that is the first application on our reports. And I'm looking at page 28 of our reports, which is the map of the consultation area. And it shows 2 kilometres out from where the site is, which takes in the whole of Montrose. Now, considering all the supermarkets and petrol stations that are already in Montrose, that you aren't supplying alcohol at the moment, what makes you think that people would go to you for the alcohol?
So perhaps to assist, I've got your report. In terms of the PDF, is it perhaps page 26 of 31 rather than page 28? I'm just trying to make sure we're looking at the same. I downloaded your report prior to this hearing, the correct page.
I'm looking at page 28, which shows the map of your consultation area.
It may well be that my download didn't have the many pages, but I can see the map. I think the important thing to take from this, Councillor, and I'm happy to address the issue in relation to Montrose more directly. First of all, in relation to the map that you're seeing, what that sets out is the radius that was necessary in order to get 200 interviewee respondents. That map will illustrate a radius of 2 kilometres. It's only in relation to the number of people who were interviewed. The application is presenting locality being 1 kilometre from the premises. And what one sees in relation to 1 kilometre from the premises for Montrose would be that 58 persons of the 200 interviewed are resident within 1 kilometre, and they considered the petrol station to be the principal or main source of fuel. 44 persons resident within 1 kilometre consider themselves as being reliant on the petrol station as being their principal or main source of fuel, and 50 resident within 1 kilometre of the premises considered that if the petrol station were to close, they would become materially inconvenienced or disadvantaged by having to go elsewhere. Convener can be found on page 7 of the market research document for Montrose. So there are 2 issues there. Firstly, whilst I appreciate the map that you've been provided with shows 2 kilometres. That is simply to illustrate to the board the radius that was required in order to take 200 interviewees as part of the survey. The application is of 1 kilometre, which is a correct locality in my submission. And when one looks at the figures 58, 44 and 50 that I've just mentioned to you, then the statutory test is met.
Thank you.
Any other questions from members? Comments then? Councillor Fairweather.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks, Mr. Clancy, for your presentation. I must say that the fact that they've got 71 stores already with licences without any problem bodes well for the two in the application today. I know both the stores. In fact, I regularly use the one up in Arbroath, and when I had a shop up in Montrose, I used the one in Montrose as well. And they're both busy sites. The Arbroath one, I would probably say would certainly benefit from having a small range of alcohol, because at one time, just across the road, there was a Summerfield supermarket that turned into Haldane's, and that's been long gone. And there are an awful lot of residents and houses in that particular area. I don't see any issues with this. We don't have an over provision in Angus at this particular time, or in our growth. So I'll be moving to grant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fairweather. Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, I believe the custom and practice has completely changed around selling alcohol at petrol stations. I'm sure we all live close to a similar petrol station with a store attached which sells alcohol. I think it would be perverse to deny the licence in these cases. In fact, would probably be open to legal challenge. And in addition to that, I think during the pandemic, people's shopping habits have changed slightly, and some people prefer using smaller local stores to the very large supermarkets. And I think that's a good trend. I hope that continues personally. So I would move that we approve these licences without any further ado. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Whiteside. Mr. Clancy, we did actually, you touched on the Arbroath one before the Montrose one, and that's our agenda in the order, but that's not a problem. Do you want to say anything about the Montrose site, anything that's different to Arbroath? And then what I will do is I will ask members to, we'll determine the Montrose one first and then the Arbroath one. Thank you.
No, thank you, convener. I've probably made the error of going in alphabetical order.
No, that's okay.
From the agenda. Before convener, you invited me to do so. I was about to say, for good order, we've had a sort of wide-ranging discussion about both applications, and really what I would invite the board to do is to accept the submissions I've made in relation to Arbroath as my submissions in relation to Montrose, and I simply say that for good order, so that the applications have been properly considered. The only I think it's appropriate to draw to the board's attention. I mentioned the capacity for Arbroath was 14 square metres, the capacity for Montrose is 20 square metres. So in my submission, we're talking about broadly similar BWS areas across both stores. In relation to Montrose, in relation to Arbroath, I indicated that I could only identify 2 other off sales within 1 kilometre. In relation to Montrose, without being too prescriptive, my own research seemed to identify 4 off sales within a 1 kilometre radius, Tesco, Premier, Scotmid, and off licence. And again, all I would submit is that there is no over provision policy, and that of itself would not amount to over provision either. I'm just having a quick look at my notes, but everything I said in relation to the licensing objectives in relation to Arbroath would apply with equal force to Montrose. There's a factual difference in relation to the licensing objective for securing public safety. Arbroath's CCTV system is 4 internal, 5 external. Montrose is 4 internal, 8 external. Montrose just happens to have a couple more CCTV cameras in place. And I think, convener, that those are the only differences. I don't really propose to go through the Montrose market research data in any great detail, just given the steer I've already had from the board that you're inclined to grant. So I will take it as read that board members had an opportunity to consider the market research in advance and they're content with what was lodged on behalf of the applicant. So with all of that in mind, for good order, I'd simply move that both applications, one in respect of Montrose firstly, and then the second in respect of Arbroath, are granted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clancy. Councillor Moore and Councillor Favour, your hands are still up. Are they old hands?
Old hands.
New.
Okay, Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Yes, I picked up on Councillor Fairweather's comment that 71 stores are running with alcohol and no problems. I've not seen any evidence of that in the submission. Where market research is concerned, I always take it with a little pinch of salt, because I remember the conversation between Sir Humphrey Appleby and Bernard about how he got Bernard to turn around 180 degrees, and it was very well done, and I've seen it done in real life, so I take these with a pinch of salt. I think that they are excluded premises. I don't think that there would be a material disadvantage to people. I don't think that people would be totally reliant on them. Considering Arbroath, certainly, it's only 1.2 kilometres by road, not as by the crow flies, but by how far he has to walk and push a flat tyre. And it's 1.2 kilometres to Morrison's. It's not that much further to Asda, so I'm not convinced by the argument. However, I am not going to go to the parapets on this one, and if members wish to grant, then I'm not going to oppose it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Moore. Anyone else? Right then, well, we'll deal with the Montrose one first. You have the recommendations in front of you. I'm going to move, subject to our usual statutory conditions, that we grant the Montrose application. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
And the same again, members, the one at Kearney Street in Arbroath, again with the usual statutory conditions, I'm going to move that we grant that application. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Has since joined us since the start of the meeting, and I believe he wishes to make a declaration of interest. Councillor Nicholl, thank you.
Thank you very much. Consider being late, but I had IT problems, and I thank the officers for getting me in for a start. Agenda item 5F, Strathmore Rugby Club. I was a member of Strathmore Rugby Club. I'm no longer a member for the past 10 years, and I will stay in the meeting and vote if necessary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nicholl. Thank you very much. Okay, members.
Sorry, convener, could I just clarify through yourself with Councillor Durno what application she actually declared an interest on? I thought she had said item 8, which is the Chief Constable's report. Could I just clarify with you, Councillor Durno, what one that you're declaring an interest on? Fiona, I think it's the item that's on green paper.
Number 9, I think.
Sorry, I maybe got my numbers wrong. Is this in Civic Licensing Committee? Oh, maybe, sorry. I just thought it was a licensing issue, sorry. Oh yeah, that's okay, that's okay, just so we're clear. So
sorry, can I come in, Fiona? I think it's item 9, the personal licenses.
I think it is, Councillor Whiteside. It's number 9 on this agenda.
Yeah,
I just got my numbers wrong. Sorry.
No, that's
You'll leave for that application. You'll know when I'm not here. That's the one. Thank you.
That's a certainty.
okay, thank you very much. Okay then. 4C is the Montrose Playhouse Cinema and Art Centre. And That's in Montrose. Is there anyone for speaking to this application?
Good morning, Convener, Your Honours. My name is Janet Hood and I'm
Oh,
appearing
yes,
on behalf of Montrose Cinema. Thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Hood, nice to see you again. You know the setup.
Do you want me just to start?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm really excited about this particular application for the cinema in Montrose. As you know, the swimming pool shut down and it was taken over by the Montrose Playhouse Project Limited. And I understand that there have been a huge amount of anticipation for this, not a little, quite a lot, honest here, outside policy. What they would like to do is to feature once a month the latest film that's being coming out. So you will have a sort of red carpet event. And they want to be permitted to start showing these film premieres at midnight with a sale of drinks, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic, and food and snacks until 3 o'clock. Last orders for food and drink to be at 2:30 or half an hour before the end of the film, whichever is the earlier. Now, why am I asking for this? It's because this makes a film premiere really special. I know that some in Aberdeenshire, for instance, they already have something of a very similar nature in Peterhead, and these are the type of offering that film buffs, I think, would really enjoy. The operators want to create also and hold an annual film festival. I'm advised that they do have connections among others with Hollywood and Bollywood, and they expect to be able to attract possibly not A-list stars, but certainly stars from these regimes to come to talk to people, to have special film showing, to have real serious event. Now, as you know, the Montrose Music Festival grew from basically nothing into something that's absolutely amazing, and that the same people are involved in the background of this event. And I see no reason why this won't come to be a success. Because these are unusual occurrences, the festival would be advised to authorities, that's police, yourselves, and anybody else that you think we should advise 3 months in advance of the start date of the festival. The aim of it is to show several premiere film showings, some of which would commence at midnight and would be in addition to the 12 other premieres proposed to be shown throughout the year. The festival will include all-day showings of film, director, film star Q&As and other special events, including educational events relating to performance, live music, talks, and the premises operators would like to have the option to remain open late to facilitate this. Food, soft and alcoholic drinks and beverages would be on offer, as well as alcohol, until 2:30. The next thing that we discussed with my clients was gaming events. Now, I know nothing about this and I had to look it up. There are international gaming events which require competitors to take part over a continuous 24 to 72-hour period. These are events when computer games are played and the competitions are global. They go on round the clock, and it would be hoped that Your Honours would permit the premises to open, but to note that alcohol would only be served to observers during normal core hours. Otherwise, the premises would remain open, be able to serve food, meals, snacks, non-alcoholic drinks and beverages to participants and observers. Of course, all of the events described will be suitably stewarded, and the organisers will communicate at an appropriate time, again with local authorities and the police, to ensure proper compliance and proper running of the events. Given that many of the gaming events are likely to involve persons under the age of 18, advanced disclosure would be required for any person supervising these events. And it's anticipated that the majority of tickets sold for them would be in advance, although there would be a capacity for ticket sales at the door. That's in particular for the film festival and the premieres, the monthly premieres. Patrons will, however, be encouraged to book in advance. The board are also asked to consider whether this type of request should be allowed or whether the applicant should be invited to make extended hours applications. Now, extended hours applications are perfectly reasonable, but they do come at a cost, not actually to the applicant. The applicant can easily put applications in advance, but the cost is to local government having to deal with them within a reasonable length of time. And because these are events which can actually be predicted, in my view, this would fall within the ability for a board to grant it, as has happened elsewhere, for seasonal variations to the license, but that is for you and not for me, and it's hoped that you might be persuaded. Other activities which might take place within and without core hours would of course be conference facilities. This would be to facilitate business within the area, educational facilities. This would, as I have said earlier, to cover all of the arts, restaurant, bar meals, receptions. Somebody might want to have a wedding or something like that in one of the events. This would all be during normal core hours. Recorded music and live performance. There could be dance facilities in the activities room, theatre, gaming, indoor and outdoor sports, and that would be yoga, that type of thing. There might even be televised sports shown on the big screen for things like Wimbledon, etc. And outdoor drinking facilities. They've got a rather nice patio just outside what was the old front door and entrance into the cinema. And I think you'd be absolutely delighted to see it. It's going to be rather well done. They want the premises to open from 9 in the morning for the showing of matinees. Now, you might think that's a bit early, but I was down in London recently with my daughter-in-law, and we took the 2-year-old to the cinema and watched some rather good Disney films first time in the morning, and lots of other people were there with children. And I think that's something that can be great fun for mothers and gives them an opportunity to meet, to enjoy the films, and then to go on and actually perhaps have tea, coffee, a snack, etc. within the facilities. And the premises would like to open for Keep Fit and yoga, etc. from 7 in the morning, because a lot of people do enjoy going, no alcohol obviously being sold at that time, or those times rather, but a lot of people enjoy going to keep fit before work. I'm not one of them. Other activities, obviously the main business of the facility is a cinema, but they want to encourage the other uses which your Honours Clerk has kindly put into the report. They suggest that if they were having an event, perhaps if they were having, if they were showing the latest Bond film, which one hopes will come, they might have a casino night. This isn't with real money, but you've all probably been to something like this, which could take place in conjunction with other events. The Late Night Film Festival, late night films and film